Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is Straight to the Point Tech, and I'm back again with another video. And for today's video, we are going to be talking about the Xbox Series X and is it worth it in 2024? Now, right now, I'm recording with my mobile phone because my actual camera that I use is broken. I have to get it fixed. But anyways, guys, let's get straight to it. So, is the Xbox Series X worth it in 2024? And the answer is yes, absolutely. I recommend it. I have one. I also have a PS5, but we'll talk about that later. But guys, basically, the Xbox Series X dropped during the pandemic, which was 2024. And in my opinion, it blew the Xbox One X out of the water. And the Xbox One X was a beast console that was like, towards the end life cycle of the Xbox One series. But Xbox One X was powerful. I mean, it was a great console. I had one, and it was great. But as far as the Xbox Series X go, guys, I mean, it's a 1 terabyte SSD inside of the actual console, which is great. It support things like, you know, um, quick resume, and in my opinion, the quick resume technology is much better and more efficient than the PS5's quick resume. I mean, it just works a lot faster, in my opinion, And like I said, I have both consoles and I've tested both, so I can speak, from firsthand. And then not to mention, guys, the Series X, I believe, has a AMD Zen 2 CPU. I mean, that's not bad. That's actually great, considering what the Series X offers. And then I believe the GPU, it's a RDNA 2 and it's 12 teraflops of power. So, I mean, you're getting a pretty good console with, you know, a combined CPU and GPU. You're not missing out on, you know, you're not missing anything in the CPU and GPU department. I mean, it holds up extremely well. Of course, obviously the console is 4K ready, up to 120 frames per second, so basically, you're going to get games rendered at higher frame rates, especially if the game has FPS boost or supports 120 frames per second. Not all games do, of course, but the games that do, you definitely see the difference in the frames. Also, you guys, you gotta have your TV has to have that type of technology to be able to support it, because if it doesn't, then you won't see the difference, or monitor, whichever you have. And of course, the console is backwards compatible up to like 99% of the Xbox, library overall. Period. You can play on the actual Series X. So I mean, that's another thing is not missing in the department as far as backwards compatibility goes. I mean, you're good in that department. Um, Game Pass. Obviously, we all know what Game Pass Ultimate is. Game Pass, period. You get the full library of, you know, previous Xbox, games that was on the one, the one, the 360, and then the original Xbox. And then you have the subscription portion of Game Pass that you can use and download games to your actual console, of course, obviously. And then you have the cloud gaming portion of the Xbox Game Pass, which still needs some work. It's not as efficient to me. You still get like a lot of frame drops and inconsistent online experience as far as multiplayer, and the game's just dropping frames because the connection is inconsistent. So Microsoft really needs to work on that. But another thing you get is storage expansion ability. I mean, it already comes with 1 terabyte SSD, but you guys got to remember too, a lot of the software and applications that come stock with a lot of the software applications that come stock with the console, basically, take up a good chunk of the space. So you're not getting 1 terabyte, you're not getting 1 terabyte, excuse me, of space, right then and there. Some of the onboard, software, is gonna take up some ass space. So you gotta keep that in mind. But you could always add, an external SSD, to the console and stuff, and you good money. You know what I'm saying? And then, you got cloud storage for your Xbox Series X, so that helps out as well. And then the build of the console is phenomenal. I mean, to me, you know, everybody, you know, had an opinion on it when it first came out, saying that, you know, it looked like a refrigerator, and you know, it wasn't the most attractive console. But you know, I feel like it's well built. You know, it stands vertically. I mean, the fan is on top of the console. I mean, you could lay it horizontal as well, but I would say keep it vertical just for, like, you know, ventilation purposes. um but guys, the thing that really makes the Xbox Series X shine, in my opinion, is it supports a technology called low frame rate compensation. So what LFC is basically like, you know, it doubles the frames of games that render at 25 to 30 frames per second, even older games, right? So take example, um, I got 007 GoldenEye um via Rare Replay. Let me see if I have it on my hard drive at the moment. Let's see here. Okay, I have it right here. So like guys, for example, 007 GoldenEye is a game that came out years ago. Now we all know when it came out years ago on Nintendo 64, it probably was only like 24 frames per second, you know, and it looked terrible. However, though, the Xbox Series X supports low frame rate compensation, and what it does, it just doubles the frames, right? So, you know, essentially, if I'm only getting 24 frames per second on, you know, 007, with LFC enabled, I'm getting 48 frames per second. So, like, you know, right now, you know, I'm just gonna select mission, boom, damn, agent, boom, 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 boom. I'll just skip through this. And guys, like at the moment, you know, me recording this video doesn't do it any justice, but I'm pretty sure, you know, if you guys do turn on the video, you know, in the video settings, 720 p at 60 frames per second, you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about. So this is like, you know, one of the key, you know, features of the Series X. It supports low frame rate compensation. You get better frames. Your frames are double. Like, that's something that the PS5 supposedly has, but Sony did not implement it well. It's not implemented well at all. You know, so this is one thing that you guys got to keep in mind when it comes to choosing the Series X over the PS5. That technology is amazing, and it's here to stay. And I feel like the next iteration of the Xbox that comes out, whether it comes out with whether they come out with Series X2, or, you know, another variant of the Series X, is going to just make that, you know, technology pop even more, because not many people know about it. A lot of people have a Series X and they don't understand that technology. But another thing, guys, also is that, you know, people don't understand, you need to have a modern television too. You know, at least a modern OLED or even a modern LED TV. You know, I'm gonna say like, you know, a Samsung, a LG, or a Sony that came out between the years 2017 and, you know, up until this point, 2024. You know, and it has to be mid-range. You know, a lot of the lower end 4K TVs, like the, you know, and I'm not making fun of anybody or trying to slight anybody, but a lot of the lower end like Roku TVs and Insignia, they're not gonna work. They're 4K, but they don't have the same type of technology. They don't have the same GPU, CPU, and other features that the mid-range to high-end TVs have. Like, for example, this is an LG O3, excuse me, an LG C3 OLED. You know, I got this recently. So this TV has the technology to support, you know, that type of technology the Series X has. And you also have to have HDMI 2.1, you know, as far as cables, and your TV has to be able to support HDMI 2.1. So, you know, keep that in mind, guys. But that's just one thing to me that, you know, regardless of what's going on in the console world as far as sales and, you know, what's the best console, you know, between the PS5 and the Series X, in my opinion, the Series X wins, you know, in the technical department. Now the PS5 may win as far as, you know, its vast majority of games that's available, the library of games that's available. Yes, we all know that. And like I said, I have a PS5, you know. I don't know if you guys can see it in the far left corner, you know, it's connected to my other LG OLED TV. But, you know, as far as like from a graphical perspective, aesthetically, like visually, the Series X wins. You know, that's just, you know, in my opinion. And if you look at, you know, the technical breakdown on paper, the PS5 versus the Series X, the Series X wins. But another thing, you know, I'll do is I'll take Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, one of my favorite games. This game rendered at 30 frames per second when it first came out. With LFC on the Series X, I'm getting 60 frames per second. And I'm also going to show you guys how to set up, you know, LFC on the Series X. It's pretty simple. I guarantee you, like, you know, once you see it, you're like, oh, yeah, really? I didn't know that. Or you probably didn't even notice the difference between LFC and having 120 hertz enabled, and, you know, that. Like, we'll get to that in a second. But anyways, so I'm going to load up Red Dead Redemption 2. It's loading at the moment. This was a phenomenal game. I'm not sure, you know, how many of you played this or if you've beat it and, you know, you've gotten a chance to explore, you know, at least a few minutes of it. But if you have the opportunity to get this game, get it, you know. My words are slurred, like I'm not even, you know, speaking correctly. You know, that's how great this game is. Like, you know, there's no words can describe how amazing this game is. Okay, so right now, right, you know, John Mortensen, this game is rendering at 60 frames per second, guys. Now, a lot of people might look and say, hey, you know, I can't see it. But like I said, when you watch this video, don't watch this video on 480 progressive, right? Go to the video edit settings on YouTube and turn on at least 720p and you'll see 60 frames per second. Guys, the game looks amazing. It's rendering at 60 frames. You know, someone on Facebook called me a liar. I was arguing with them, telling them that the Series X supports LFC, something that the PS5 doesn't, and they couldn't really fathom what I was talking about. Well, this is what I'm talking about. It looks phenomenal, guys. It looks amazing, you know, but that's something that, you know, the PS5 the Series X has that the PS5 doesn't. You know, that's a technology that Microsoft actually implemented on the actual first, you know, Xbox, you know, I guess plus, you know, Xbox One, you know, Xbox One X. It initially came out on the Xbox One, and a lot of people really didn't care for it or understood it. But now that the Series X out, it just, you know, it pops more. It's implemented better in the console, guys. So I mean, that's just one thing that you gotta understand about the Series X, that, you know, Microsoft was ahead of their time. You know, even dating back to the original Xbox that came out in 2001, it blew PS2 out of the water. PS2 just had the catalog of video games, but the actual Xbox was a graphical powerhouse. And we're talking about Microsoft, a computer company. So, I mean, of course, they're going to make sure that their console, you know, is boasting specifications similar or close enough to a gaming PC. But yes, guys, as you can see, Red Dead Redemption looks beautiful. You know, John Mortensen, I mean, it looks amazing. But yeah, so anyways, I said I would show you guys how to enable this setting. So let's get straight to it. So I'm going to close Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, guys, like I said, you have to have a television that's modern, a modern LED or an OLED TV. I'm talking about anything that came up between the year 2017 and now 2024. And your television has to support HDMI 2.1 and 120 hertz. Because if it doesn't, then guys, you won't be able to experience this on your Series X, you know? So if I go to settings, let me show you, and I go to TV and display options, all you literally need to do is the following. Make sure 4K ultra high definition is enabled, or you can, you know, you can put it on 1440p, 1080p, 720p, whatever your liking is as far as the display. I mean, who's gonna go below 4K ultra high definition? I'm not sure. Now, if you're connected to a monitor, you know, that's different, and your monitor is only 1440p. But connecting it to a monitor is a completely different beast, because most monitors render at 120 or 240 hertz, which essentially is 240 frames per second. But that just depends on your monitor's technology and how it's going to implement and you know mesh how it's going to implement and mesh with the actual Series X. So anyways, just make sure 4K ultra high definition is enabled. Keep the refresh rate on 60 hertz. All right. Make sure as far as video modes, you have allow 50 hertz enabled, allow 24 hertz. Make sure variable refresh rate is off. You don't need it on. Allow YCC 422. You need that. Auto HDR, that's fine. You can have that on. You really don't need it. But allow HDR 10 and then allow 4K if you want it in 4K. Like I said, you don't have to have it on 4K, but you want to be able to see it at its full visual potential, right? And then, you know, what you do is go to video fidelity overscan. Make sure the color depth is 8-bit. You don't need to have the video fidelity scan at, you know, 30 or 36 bits. That's not necessary. Maybe for like monitors that work well, but for actual TV, 8 bits is totally fine. And then make sure the color space is standard. You know, you don't need PC red, green, and blue specifically because that's for PC. That's more so for monitors, right? And then, you know, you're good to go. So after that, you know, you'll load up Red Dead Redemption 2 or whatever game you have. You'll see how LFC is going to basically kick in, which is low frame rate compensation. Now, the games that are rendered at 60 frames per second already, it's just going to increase the frames. It's going to double the frames naturally, right? But a game that's rendered at 30 frames per second, like we all know Banjo-Kazooie back in the days when N64 was 20 frames per second. The game was slow and sluggish, but back then we were kids, so you know we didn't care how we looked. We weren't really paying attention to graphics like that. You know, it was the enjoyment of the actual games that we were concerned about. But guys, Banjo-Kazooie is running at 48 frames per second at the moment because LFC kicked in. Like I said, you know, once you watch this video, edit the video settings and watch it in 720p at 60 frames. Banjo-Kazooie is now running at about 40 frames per second. Guys, that's just because LFC technology on the Xbox is just amazing. On the Series X, that is. But guys, I just wanted to just, you know, go over, you know, is the Series X worth it in 2024? And just to answer your question again, yes, it's worth it, guys. You know, Series X is going into its 4th year, and it still has a bunch of like a bunch of power, you know, that needs to be, you know, displayed at its fullest potential. Still plenty of games coming out. Stalker 2 is coming soon. So I feel like, guys, you're not missing, you know, you're not missing, but you're missing out if you don't, you know, decide to basically, you know, purchase a Series X, you know, in 2024, you know, and you're still holding on to your Xbox One, you know, Xbox One X, which, by the way, Xbox One X is still a great console, but you're missing out, guys. Like, so should you make the decision to upgrade to a Series X in 2024? The answer is yes. Go ahead and do it. Over the PS5, I would say it just totally depends on your taste. I have both consoles. I've always been a guy all throughout the years. I've had dual consoles. I've had every console known to man except for the actual Atari. But yeah, guys, 2024, you know, should you buy the Series X? Yes. The next iteration of the Xbox is coming soon. I'm sure that's going to be a powerhouse. I'll be picking that up. But yes, guys, go ahead and make that purchase this holiday season or for birthday, for your birthday or whenever. And just know that the Xbox Series X is a wonderful console, you know, especially paired with a great TV. But anyways, guys, this is Straight to the Point Tech. Leave a comment below on the video and let me know what you would like to see, what you thought about the video, and any other recommendations as far as videos you would like. But yeah, guys, this is Straight to the Point Tech, and I'm out. Peace.